Okay. All
Okay, go
right.
ahead.
Oh, all right. Oh, I'm going to get rid of, I've got your little, okay, there we go. I had a little screen that said you were recording, so I wanted to get that out of my way. Okay, so let's see. So this is very official here anyway. Let's see. This is in keeping with our theme for this year, which is what makes a community. I'm really happy that Melissa Dressler has agreed to speak to us and answer questions. She's the director of Lancaster Downtowners, which you know, and some of you might have read about her on the Lancaster Downtowners website, but if you didn't, she's a Lancaster City resident. She recently served as career counselor manager with the Occupational Development Center, where she provided job training services and designed and implemented programming to expand employment opportunities for adults with developmental disabilities. And she holds a degree in gerontology, which I think is wonderful, from Messiah College, and has previous experience as a care manager for Philadelphia Corporation for Aging. And this is really exciting because I don't know. And I will have to say that this was Farida's idea, her suggestion. And ever since she mentioned it, this is actually, we've talked about this for a long time. And I think as I get older, it becomes more important to talk about how you can make a community of people that are going to support everybody. So thank you, Melissa, for coming to talk to us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for that introduction as well. And I'm going to provide, I guess, just a little bit more context to who I am and how I came to be here before we get started into talking about downtowners and the village movement and all of those fun things that I get to spend my time doing. So I grew up in northwestern Pennsylvania in Venango County, a very rural area of the state. I grew up with all of my extended family around me everywhere, cousins, aunts, uncles. There were 4 households within a quarter mile, and most were not further than that. So, and I was raised with, I got to spend a lot of time with my grandparents and my great grandmother in particular. And so the idea of an intergenerational familial network, that community support, that village is one that just happened naturally there for me. So I went on to study gerontology and therapeutic recreation. And yeah, that's my space. I think that the connecting theme in my work and my mission is that we're a stronger community with better quality of life when we know a lot of people who are different from us, and then we can build that into how our neighborhoods, into our blocks, into our homes, and how we want to live. After I graduated with my bachelor's, I did a year of voluntary service in San Francisco. I worked with middle schoolers and confirmed that working with older people is where I belong. So that was a good learning experience. And I met the gentleman who would then become my husband a few years later in that voluntary service unit. He was from Lancaster after I spent a few years in Philadelphia, ended up moving here. So I've been in this city for 13 years now, always in the city. If you're familiar with Lancaster City, we live in the Southeast, and just love, for me, the combination of small town connections, but I can still go to something crazy like a Mexican restaurant, or go to the theater, or something. There's a little bit of liveliness and variety there in that. I have 2 daughters. One, we are celebrating her 6th birthday this afternoon, and then my oldest will be turning 9 in a couple of weeks. So my role with Lancaster Downtowners started 5 years ago. And that was the first point within the organization's history that they had hired a paid staff person. The organization was founded officially, filed as a 501c3 in 2008, and then it was 10 years before they decided they were at a turning point of transitioning from an all-volunteer village to one that has a part-time executive director. And I will talk a little bit more about that. I usually, when I give presentations, usually I have about 20 minutes or 45 minutes. So I kind of have a version for both of those. And so I'm going to share my kind of standard slideshow with you all. There's some videos there that I incorporate when we have time. So we're going to see if I can get those to work right and add to all of that. And I am very open to questions either throughout the presentation or at the end. Is there a format that you prefer? I'm good just going with it. So I will watch, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat if they come up there. But first, let's see. I can do the screen share. We've been back in person quite a bit, and I think my Zoom skills might be rusty. Let's see, that's the screen I'm sharing. I want to go from the beginning.
Looks good.
Looks good. Okay. I don't want that to be full screen if I can. All right, well, this is what we'll go with. Okay. All right, so that's who I am. That's why we're here. Can't change.
If you might need to just click on the picture and yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Sam.
You're welcome.
All right. So, and I'm going to make these videos smaller so I can see my words here. Okay. So why might we need a village? Why might we need to be thinking about this? This is a Census Bureau graph that surprises a lot of people. It's when we think about how our longevity and life expectancy has changed over the last century. You'll look and see where we were in 1960, it's the year my mother was born. We were a triangle. There were more people younger than older. And as the decades have gone on and there have been advancements in healthcare, advancements in our living environment and things like that, also the changes in birth rate, we are now looking for a society that is a little bit more like that pillar. We're going to be more evenly spread throughout our decades, throughout our ages, and we are not in a society that was built with that in mind. When we think about things like when Social Security was enacted, it was enacted when the life expectancy was about 63 years old. It wasn't funded or set up expecting to provide steady income for people for 20 or 30 years. Those are things that we need to look at and make sure that they are there, or that we're adjusting our lives, sometimes by those formal systemic approaches, or in the area of a village, putting together a more community-based focus on how we're going to continue to live high quality lives and meet all of the needs and have opportunities for folks to express their purpose throughout their entire lives. I'm gonna go, this is our video, and this is one video that kind of looks at that program. Now, one thing that's going to be different as I speak today and as you consider where you are, Lancaster Downtowners is a very urban focused environment, and so that changes some of the ways that we are able to interact as a community. It changes our transportation, it changes sort of the built environment of that, which would be different from a more rural or suburban or spread out area. Let me see. So let's see if we can get this video here. There we go. Almost there. All right. Get that in full screen. Is the sound coming through?
It is not. You
Okay.
have to click that little toggle button when you do the share. Do you know what I'm talking about in the?
Yeah,
Okay.
share, so optimize for video.
It's not just it's near that. We
Um,
still,
Data suggests that if we
now we
reach
can hear it. Yes.
Good, yeah, okay.
5 years of age, it's likely we'll live to 85. We're living longer and we're having fewer babies.
The aging society is about the fact that you have larger proportions of people over the age of 60 than you have who are under the age of 15.
And it's not just America that's an aging society. Europe, China, Japan, we're an aging globe. An aging society isn't just about old people. It's not just about baby boomers. Gen X will likely live longer, and so will millennials.
The baby boomers are an introduction to what will be a permanent shift. It is not the pig and the python, a large snake that swallows a pig, and you see that bulge going through the snake and then coming out the other end eventually. Well, ours never comes out the other end. This is a permanent state we're now in a remarkable shift.
And the shift will utterly transform our society. How and how long we work, how and where we live, how we organize our families, medical care, economic and political lives, how we organize our thinking. This will give you an idea of what's ahead. Right now, about half of us live in the suburbs, and it's where 75% of older Americans live and want to continue to live. But suburbs were designed in the 1950s for young families and the car. There's a disconnect there we have to deal with.
It's an old rule of thumb that if you can make the community work for kids and if you can make the community work for the elderly, that it will work for everyone else.
Same with how we work. We think of 65 as a retirement age engraved in stone. But when Social Security was enacted in 1935, average life expectancy was only 62, 3 years less than retirement age. Today, we can expect to live about 15 years beyond traditional retirement age.
There isn't anything in the psychology literature that suggests that it's good for people to go on vacation for decades.
Even if it were a good thing, few of us imagine retirement as a vacation anymore. Most of us haven't saved enough, and we're all worried, for good reason, about Social Security and Medicare. What if we reimagined our standard life course? We think of it now in 3 age-segregated boxes. Age 0 to maybe 25, childhood and education. Age 25 to 65, work, and more of it, raising a family, always crunched for time. Age 65 and beyond, little work, lots of rest. What if we imagined that that third box would start just 3 years before life expectancy today, say around 75, not 65? What if we worked less in the middle of life and longer at the end? And what if we looked at aging and even our own mortality square in the eye?
Children in American society historically have only suffered losses that relate to their parents for the most part. But today and tomorrow, they're going to suffer the losses of great-grandparents, of parents, of grandparents, and so on.
So here's the point. The world we live in, the people we've become, demographically speaking, are way different from 1935 or 1950 or even 1970. But our institutions, economies, policies, Social Security, Medicare, our communities, work, all were designed for who we were 50 years ago. They don't work for us today. So, are there rough waters ahead?
When we think about an aging society, everybody swoons. Oh my God. You know, they write articles about defusing the demographic time bomb. Why is there an assumption there is no upside?
Maybe because the upside requires change. Change we have to design, legislate, wrap our heads around.
As a psychologist, I'll tell you the very first step that is really essential, and that's that we begin to envision new models, new ways of being, new lives.
How will we come of age in an aging America? The conversation begins.
Suggests that it's good for
You know,
people
they
to go
write
on
articles
vacation
about
for decades.
defusing the
Well, ours never
demographic
comes out.
time bomb.
This is
Okay. Let me set full screen there. Okay. Back to this. There. And okay. So what the village movement has tried to do is take that view of the last part of that video. This is not a huge problem. This is something that we can see as an opportunity, and we can make sure that there is space for everyone to engage in our communities, and that we're able to serve one another. And so we're very optimistic, focused network of organizations who are looking at this. All right. So what is a village? A village is generally a nonprofit organization. They're all very grassroots. You have to have a lot of energy at the base. You have to have a strong core of people who are interested in getting this going. Now, as the movement has grown, there are more places like community foundations or grants that will see the impact of a village and will be able to help support and fund. But that's something to know about your community as well. When I talk about a village, there are usually three main pillars of resources that this community and organization provides for one another. The first is social and community connection. And most villages will do that by hosting programs, events, educational, wellness events, things like that. The second tier of or pillar of support for a village would be connections to volunteers to help with everyday tasks. So that would be things like transportation to a medical appointment, simple home maintenance, technology, coaching. And there are some villages that will use non-member volunteers as their primary source of volunteers. So they may partner with area colleges or service groups and are primarily gathering their volunteers from there. Our village has primarily other members as the volunteers supporting one another. So it's more of a internal mutual aid system at that point. So, and then the third tier, and I'll go into more information about how we do all of these things as well, but would be providing connections to information and resources. So the village can meet a lot of needs, and I think that we fill some very important gaps in what services are available in the community, but a village cannot provide daily home health care. A village cannot do things like work as a end of life doula. There are certain things that we need to make connections to other community organizations and providers for, but we try to make that as seamless as possible. Okay. Got another one here, and please speak up if this doesn't go as it should again. Okay. How's that sound? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. Great. All right. So this is about our village. This was we had this put together in the summer of 2020.
The Downtowners is a group of almost to retire, soon to retire, already retired adults who want to age in place, who basically like living in a walkable city, and who are determined to help one another stay in their own homes and enjoy the city.
The Downtowners as an organization have enriched the city by creating a forum in which older adults can connect with one another and connect into the fabric of the city.
I've been with the group since its start 12 years ago. And back then I was interested, mostly in social activities and educational programs. But now, Just One Call is something that means a great deal to me.
Hello, Debbie. This is Bettina with Just One Call. Hi, I'm right in front of your house right now.
Just One Call is a marvelous service. It puts together volunteers from the group itself from the Downtowners with people who need help doing things. It can range from a ride to the doctors or shopping or cleaning your gutters. I've had people help me, and I pay back by taking care of cats and watering plants occasionally.
I have a pretty active lifestyle. The Just One Call program allows me to do things on my own schedule, on my own time. Very good. Here we go. The best thing by far is meeting the other people and having one-on-one experiences with people. It's a large organization, and I don't know everybody, but through Just One Call, I know a lot more than I would normally.
Well, the important thing is for you guys to be enjoying this process. A typical class, some of them will be experienced artists and some of them won't, and some of them will have different media. When you're working with a pencil, you don't go from pure black to pure white. You're losing some of the oomph that you can have in a drawing.
This is a way to reduce the stress about everyday life stuff.
I was trying to let go.
Yeah.
So just whatever it ended up, whatever these lines ended up looking like, that
Well,
was
I
okay.
think you've succeeded.
Oh, thank you.
It's a real joy to me to see someone really pouring out their soul into a drawing. That's a wonderful thing to see. When I joined the Downtowners, I already knew I had dementia. So with me, it's been a very slow process. There's the memory support group. Talking about it and being with other people who have dementia or practitioners who deal in dementia, that helps me.
We joined together as a group for the purpose of being able to stay in our homes, but we are most active as individuals doing our, fulfilling whatever those passions are that we continue to have. More recently, we got pretty fired up about the injustice, the inequity, the problems with people of color not being treated fairly, and many of us felt like that should have been taken care of back when we were young. It shouldn't have to be happening now again.
In our group, we have a couple of old 1960s hippies who love to go out and protest. We started this group that we call the Old Folks Arising.
It is really important to have diversity in every way in our neighborhoods, and our older residents are certainly a part of the diversity, and as such are part of the strength of our city and our neighborhoods.
I have to give Mary Kay a lot of credit for facilitating and keeping us going even through this pandemic. We've been meeting much more frequently virtually than we had been. When people are ill, giving them support in whatever way helps them out, and feeling comfortable. If I were in the same circumstance, I know this group would be there for me. And that's just a wonderful feeling.
And the Downtowners is there. Even if they can't provide the specific help that one needs, it's a resource for the multiple services that we have in Lancaster County.
It's just ended up being much more than I ever expected to find.
Lancaster County itself is a vibrant county. And being in the heart of that county is our city. And to be able to stay there as long as possible is certainly my goal.
All right, that'll be the last technical thing we need to go through. So we should be good from here on out. So skip here. Next slide. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about village history and how Downtowners goes into that. For Lancaster Downtowners, it was about 2002, 2003 when there was a small group at a Mennonite church in the city who was reading I think it was a Mary Pfeiffer book on aging and sort of reimagining retirement and our later years. And at that point in Lancaster County, the city was not as developed and as popular as it has become recently. And also within the sort of unique area of Lancaster, there are, I think, 18 continuing care retirement communities. So the large communities that you move into a cottage or an apartment, and then you'll have care provided as you need it up through skilled nursing and end of life care. And so this group of people, our founders and friends, were saying, I think that I would rather move into the city, invest in a house in the city instead of investing in the continuing care option, and figure out a way to live my life in community there. Recognizing that I will want and need that community of support and that kind of peace of mind that's provided there. So that was the initial conversation. And at the same time, Downtowners were not the only group around the country having that conversation. And there was a lot of information that came forth when a group in Beacon Hill in Boston gathered together, and they came up with the village format. They called it a village. They said, this is what it is. And they wrote a guidebook on how to become a village. There was a really popular New York Times article about them. And from there, the movement spread. And that was the group of folks who started Downtowners, bought the manual and developed our village based on that model. There was not an official village to village network until 2010, but there has always been a sort of a community of shared learning amongst the villages. We have been a member of the network since it started. They provide resources for already established villages. They provide resources for villages in development. There's a really active listserv. We frequently ask one another questions and try as best as we can to not have to reinvent the entire wheel. Usually we're adjusting things to our community. But it's a broad network of support, and it's growing. Now there are over 240 open villages in the United States, 48 in development, 9 in Pennsylvania. Most of them are in the Philadelphia region. I was excited to learn within the last month or so, a group in York that has been working on getting a village going finally has their 501c3 status. So we're excited to see them grow and have them across the river. One thing I also want to note here is that there has been a growing network towards regional networks of support for villages. There's Village Movement California, which had some great success in getting villages worked into the state's master plan on aging. And there's also a large concentration of villages in the DC area that work together and collaborate and share a lot there. And so all of this to say, if you're a community that is considering a village, you don't have to start from scratch. There are a lot of great resources for how to do this and to fit the model to a way that best suits your community. All right. So this was our earliest news coverage in 2008, right when we incorporated. The 3 founders featured in this photo here are still involved in the village. So we have a lot of really long-term members, and we have a lot of folks who are new to the village as well. All right, and then some of our more recent coverage was we were in the collective, I guess, article collected together in the New York Times last March, specifically talking about how Gen X folks are getting involved in villages. All right, so who are we now? Downtowners have about 245 members right now. We're ages 48 to 98. We have lifetime city residents and recent transplants. Folks live alone with spouses or partners. We have some co-housing arrangements in single family homes and apartments. One question that we have kind of gone with since our beginning is, well, what does it mean to be a downtowner? Do I have to live in downtown Lancaster? And that's a very important question in this area. We consider our catchment to be all of Lancaster County, but our programs are based in the city. And so if someone is interested in joining into the social aspects, into the community aspects and info and resources, and they live 20 minutes away in Lancaster County, they can join. They just will need to figure out how they get to us. This is always interesting for folks. These are our age range brackets. So we do not have our village does not have a formal minimum age, but we do keep our programs tiered towards folks who are in retirement of interest of them. So we have folks under 60 all the way up to the age of 98. But our biggest group has consistently been folks who are in their 70s. I know when I was meeting with the organization considering employment 5 years ago, they had looked ahead and said, okay, well, most of us, the biggest, bucket of folks are 75 now. So, we need to be prepared for in 5 years when most downtowners are 80 years old. And what we see is that, yes, many people are still involved, but our biggest group of folks is still within that 75-year-old age range. That is what our programs and what our services are most geared towards, that frame of life, I guess, for where we are. Something that is really important when you are starting a village is that these are things that are done by the people who are involved. Our board of directors is made up of village members. We are just now looking to add on a couple of positions that will be more sort of maybe community connections, folks who may not be of retirement age, but we will be maintaining that 75% of our voting board is an active member in the village, because these are people that are determining what we want, what we need, and how we're going to do it, and we're deciding it they're deciding it for themselves, for ourselves. When you look at other nonprofits, that's not usually the makeup of their board. Often their board is made up with maybe other nonprofit leaders, folks from business. You always want a lawyer, someone from healthcare, and we have those roles filled within. But often a board might be making decisions for people who are receiving services without anybody who's receiving the services speaking into that. So we villages are on the other end of the spectrum. It's members making determinations about what members are receiving. My role is part-time. I do 20 to 25 hours a week. And all of the rest is done by folks who are participating in the village. We have about 200 hours a month of volunteer admin support. And so that comes in through our board, through our committees, and then other individual activities to make things happen. What do we do? Okay, so programs and providers. Most people join the village for the first time because of our programs, because of the social gatherings that we have, the educational things. We have a program committee that meets, plans what they want to do, takes ideas from other members suggesting it, sets them up. We use our website. We have a platform that's pretty specific to villages, put them on the event calendar. We mail out lists of the events to those who don't use email. And then we also have an update line that you can call and hear what's going on for the week. Okay. Lancaster Downtowners, we sort of have our own space. When I started 5 years ago, we started to rent an office space from a collaborative partner. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So there is a shared office space, but most of these events are taking place in the community. We will meet in, some of them are meeting in members' homes, some are at coffee shops, sometimes at the library. We have relationship with a church that we rent their space frequently for events. We've often used a sort of a community garden in the city for outdoor events. That's where the hot dog roast is there. With other community space. So no, we are out in the community. We do not have our own building. We don't have a community center or anything like that. And that has worked well for our organization. You can, if you're looking at our website, you can take a look. The calendar for May is pretty typical of what we do. Happy hours, supper groups, lunch groups, those are popular. Technology seminars, meet and greets with city staff or other representatives. We always have sessions on what are the changes to Medicare during open enrollment. We'll talk about estate planning. One of the newer interest groups that we have up and running is our solo agers group. And so those are folks who have defined themselves as not having family support. They're making their decisions on their own independently without having built-in supports there. And so that takes, when you're talking about, naming a power of attorney or, advanced directives or things like that, it can have a little bit of a different spin. And so we gather those folks together and talk about those issues with that lens on. We have a group of folks who walk regularly. We have a group who go to yoga regularly. And then we try to do, we have bike rides as well that goes. And so our educational programs blend the social into the informational and educational. Another committee that's does a lot of work is our resource committee. And so what that committee does when it comes to the education, they coordinate an Aging in Your Place program series. We, instead of reinventing something, we use the National Aging in Place Council's aging plan there and look at the different areas. And then we bring together panels of provider or community business experts and downtowner experts on different topics to talk about specifically aging in place. Our sessions this year have been on downsizing. So like on that panel, we heard from a realtor, from a professional organizer, and then from 3 different members who had downsized. One who was done with it, one who was in process, kind of long-term downsizing, and one who needed to make a really quick turnaround and her experience with that. So we put all that together, and then senior health and nutrition. We'll hear from Meals on Wheels, we'll hear from a geriatrician, and then from Downtowners, we collected their experiences on cooking for one or two, and how that might change, what to look for. The other thing that our resource committee is in charge of is we have a list of recommended service providers, and this is pretty typical for villages. And in particular, it's really valued by people who are new to the area. We find in Downtowners, people who've moved from out of town or even just have decided to move into the city from elsewhere in the county. And so how we collate that list is a provider has to have been used by a downtowner, and the downtowner has to provide a recommendation. And then we put them on our list. So it's like Angie's List or maybe Next Door, but it's coming from a much more select group. And then we follow up and get additional reviews from people who use them. So some of our providers have 6 reviews starting from 2013 all the way up through 2021. When there's a provider there who, if they, had a good review at first, and then we have 2 people who share that they had not so great experiences. We put those not so great experiences in there and then decide if the provider should be removed from the list or if we should just have that there. One of the things that we include is always the member who has made the recommendation or the review, so that you can see, oh, Susan used this painter. I have a few more questions. I'm going to call Susan and see, what the situation was there. So we're trying to really get that information together. So this is anything from, plumbers, mechanics. We will list tax advisors or accountants, people's experience with different home health care agencies or PT groups. And so we do not do any additional vetting. We do not check to see if the business is bonded, insured, if they, Better Business Bureau. We've decided not to do that. And so we keep that clear as we sort of on the directory as we have that there. So that's one of the ways that we'll connect people to other information and providers there. All right, this is our big one. So this is our connection to volunteers for everyday tasks. We call this just one call because when we initiated this program, it was just one call to our coordinator who will then do the work of finding the volunteers to meet your need. This is growing for us. Last year, we had over 776 hours of support provided in 529 different calls of things that we were doing. Our biggest one continues to be transportation. We provide transportation to anything. There are some other transportation providers that will maybe only take people to medical appointments, volunteer to only take people to medical appointments, only to the grocery store. We take folks to visit family, to go to a club, to go to a meeting, as far as Harrisburg Airport. We have some volunteers who will do Harrisburg Airport runs. So we use again, it's a village focused software system to facilitate this. So when someone signs up as a volunteer, they say, I am willing to provide transportation. I'm willing to do simple home maintenance, and I would like to shovel snow. And so then when a member puts in, say, a snow shoveling request, a notification via email goes out to all of our volunteers. And the first one who says, hey, I'm available, will be matched, and we'll get the rest of the service information and make that contact and complete the task. We have some volunteers that we know don't like to keep up with email. And so our Just One Call coordinator, who is a member and receives a stipend for the work that he does coordinating that. If he sees a request that comes through that's specific to their skills, he'll give them a call instead. We have recently expanded this so that people can put in a request on the website as well. They don't have to call the provider for putting in a website request. And one of the, so last year we started Tech Thursdays and provided over 80 hours of technology coaching to members, which is really impactful and has been really wonderful. And we have one volunteer who wanted to focus their time on that in doing sort of longer visits. So let's say if you have one technology need, there's probably a couple other things that have piled up too. So maybe you really need your printer to work, but also there was an update and then there's a question about your phone. And so we're kind of putting those together for one visit at a time to, slowly and carefully address all of your tech needs. We've been doing that. And then another program that's newer, as we call our Health Buddies program. And so this is matching volunteers who will take notes during medical appointments. And so those volunteers receive specific training. We are not medical advocates. We are just note takers. But they will meet with the member requesting support ahead of the appointment. Make sure you go through all of their questions that they want answered by the provider. They'll go with them to the appointments, take notes, prompt the member if there's a question that hasn't been addressed, and then we'll meet with them either immediately after the appointment if there's still energy and time, or we'll follow up with them the next day to make sure all of the information was there. We have some folks who have used this on an ongoing basis, but what we're seeing more often is that it's when someone has a referral for a new provider or has a new diagnosis for those initial appointments until they sort of get settled in, or if there's something kind of a change in status, that's when they're requesting the health buddies to go to appointments. And again, most of our volunteers are members. We have expanded that this year to more non-member volunteers through a partnership with our local Meals on Wheels program. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Actually, I'll talk about that right here. So here are some of the organizations that we work with in the community, and I'm going to highlight a few, especially as I think this is a group who is thinking about how we might do this in our area. So in 2017, when Downtowners was deciding, okay, are we going to stay the same, or are we going to, strategically work towards kind of growth and sustainability? They chose the growth mindset, but recognized that at that point, the board wanted additional support in order to hire a staff person. The board did not want to have to manage the payroll and HR and IT support and some of those things that go along with adding staff to what was previously an all volunteer standpoint. So they talked with several different organizations and found that there was a benefit and a values match to working with Landis Communities, which has a continuing care retirement community in Lidditz, Pennsylvania, and has had opened a 55 and up apartment building in the city of Lancaster, and they have other housing and services as well. But so the board came to an agreement with them that's a management services agreement. And so Lancaster Downtowners pays them a small fee every month for Landis Communities to provide HR oversight, IT oversight, and limited communications support. In addition, other things that we have worked on with Landis Communities, that is where we rent our shared office space from. So we have that space there. Once we initiated a business sponsor program, they became a business sponsor. So they were then donating to the organization. And we have worked with Landis collaboratively on Age-Friendly Lancaster City, which is an initiative that we're involved with the mayor. And I can talk about that a little bit more. But so that has been a really important partnership in setting us up for good use of the time and skills of the board, and to be able to have an organization there that we can ask questions and look on in that way. We're members of the Village to Village Network. We've connected volunteers to Lancaster Votes, which was voter registration initiative. We have received grant funding from the United Way of Lancaster County and from the Lancaster County Community Foundation. The first grant that we received was for a COVID response program that connected our volunteers with students who were doing virtual learning, elementary school students, to do one-on-one reading support in 2020 and 2021. So we had that, and then United Way has also funded our partnership with Meals on Wheels Lancaster, which we are still within that grant term now. And so what that has done is provided scholarships for Meals on Wheels clients to become members of our village so that we can extend the educational and social opportunities as well as the Just One Call support to their clients that are within our catchment area. And then we've collaborated on enhanced volunteer training. So we've been training both Downtowner volunteers and Meals on Wheels volunteers on things like boundaries, home safety, elder abuse, and Office of Aging 101, what services are available. So we've worked collaboratively in that way. And then a lot of these other neighborhood groups and things like that. We don't have a formal relationship with the Lancaster County Office of Aging, but we are, we're, I don't know, friends, I guess. So we, they know of us. We've really worked to help their information and referral department know what downtowners can do for people and when it might be a good referral for someone seeking services. We connect our members to their senior centers, specifically, I should say, especially to their virtual Connection Senior Center to Senior Games, and they have worked with us as part of the Age Friendly Collaborative as well. And I'm gonna move ahead, but we can come back to Age Friendly if that's of interest here. Okay, so yeah, this was, I already talked about our Z Tutor program. That was our sort of pandemic response in a way that helped. So like so many of our members had been in schools, working in schools when shutdown happened in COVID, and we're just waiting to get there. And then students were learning from home. And so that was our, this is what we could do at this time. It was work on reading, tutoring, and doing that. So we've since transitioned that to the Lancaster Partnership for Learning Equity. And they do a remote summer program. And so our tutors, our Z tutors volunteer in the summers only at this point. We have a great relationship with Franklin and Marshall, which is a college in Lancaster City. We have worked with several interns over the years. We do, excuse me?
Oh, sorry, never mind. I thought I was muted.
Oh, sorry, no problem. Didn't want to miss a question. So we work with their interns. We usually coordinate service events for their pre-orientation day of service. This one, we worked with these first-year students in a garden that surrounds a small museum in town that some of our members have been involved in transitioning to all a native plant garden. And so we got to inform them about the garden, about the history of the museum, about all of our fabulous members, and build some relationships that way. So that is a joy. We love connecting in that way and would recommend those connections if you're considering the village. This is our purpose. We want to reduce isolation, build connection, have increased independence, and enhanced purpose of life. When I talk about the village, I like to say that we only have independence through interdependence. We have to rely on one another in order to live our best lives and have that there. And so we are providing the foundation and providing the framework for that to happen for people. So I'm going to stop there because I'd like to spend a lot of time on questions that you have. So I could talk about any of this for a long time, but I want to do it in a way that is interesting to you all. So what would you like to learn more about?
I noticed in the pictures and in the of the people and the surrounding as such, it seems like it's very middle class and comfortable. What's the proportion of people who are living in really dire poverty and and inadequate income entirely for their needs. Are you reaching some of those people or what?
Yeah, I love this question, so thank you. When we have about 10% of our membership who are earning less than half of the median income. That's not the right word. But so our dues are structured at 50% of area median income, and there's a reduced rate, or there is the rate that it is. So this is into the mix of finances as well. When the village was started, it was started in the wealthiest neighborhood of the city by white people who were connected through a Mennonite church in their social circles. There has not been an emphasis on marketing or partnership throughout the growth of the village until the last maybe 3 or so years. And so what happens when you have one group of same people who are only reaching out through their similar social circles is that more of the same people are coming into the village. And so compared to the population of the city of Lancaster, we are disproportionately white, disproportionately wealthy, and disproportionately English speaking. And that is there has not been intention to change that until I'm going to say the last 4 years or so. And so some of the ways that we are working on that now, when we look at the income level, so when we're looking at sort of the income discrepancy there, it used to be that we did not share that we had reduced dues. We used to limit the number of reduced dues that were available. And so now we have shifted that so that you do not need to ask special permission. You just sign up at that level and sort of reduce the barriers there. And we're actively bringing that in. I'll get into finances a little bit more. We have worked now to intentionally partner with organizations that serve different communities than we do. We now do events pretty regularly with the African American Historical Society of South Central Pennsylvania to do educational connections there and build connections there. We are also in our partnership with Meals on Wheels, that has helped us to serve folks who are having less, who have less ability at this point, and look at the way that we're doing things in that regard. And that has also been provided the resources for us to be able to use an interpretation, phone interpretation service and things like that. I only speak English. 40% of the Lancaster City population speaks Spanish. We haven't been able to serve that community well because most of our volunteers are only speaking English as well. So we are right now we have sort of the interpretation set up there. We have a couple of Spanish speaking volunteers who help with those intakes and connecting things, but we're looking to partner in that way. So for us, our village is exactly as you saw it, disproportionately white and middle class. And part of that is because of how we were started. There are other villages across the country that were started more intentionally, multiracial, multi-language, multi-ability, and that really makes a big difference in setting up how your population is in the village. So this goes into a little bit of our mix of finances. So at this point, we budget about 50% of our operating budget will come from membership dues. That's kind of best practice recommended by the network. And so our dues for one person who earns more than about $33,000 a year, it's $190 for the year. If you earn less than $33,000, it is $95 for the year. And we will split that up into smaller payments if necessary. There's a slight discount if it's a two-person household. And that just means two people. It doesn't mean you have to be married or partners. We have, some that are, a mother and son, some are roommates, that they do a two-person household. And so that is $344 if your income is above about $36,000 for the year. And if it's less than that, it's halved. So that makes up about 50 to 55% of our budget. The rest of it is fundraising. We have a fundraising committee, and they do 3 primary events. One is we have an auction every year that usually brings in $7,000 or $8,000. There is an event in Lancaster put on by the Community Foundation every November called the Extra Give. And it encourages community giving. We transitioned our annual fund drive to correspond with the Extra Give so that we were reaching a broader audience than just our members and asking for that. So we get around maybe $10,000, maybe a little bit more from that each year. And then we have a business sponsor program. And so we recognize our business sponsors over the course of the year. We invite them we had a volunteer appreciation event yesterday. We invited them there to our annual business meeting, which is our biggest event. We have opportunities for programs, put them in our newsletter, things like that. And so we've built our business sponsorship program so that provides us maybe between $16,000 and $18,000 a year with those sponsors there. Our annual budget is about $65,000 a year, is what we operate on. So that covers my salary, the management fee to Landis, our Just One Call coordinators stipend, covers our liability insurance, what we pay for our software to be able to facilitate village things. It pays, we are renting community spaces for, Zoom subscription, our office space, envelopes. We will, a lot of, when we need to pay speakers or things like that for some of our events, new member packets. Now we didn't used to do this. Now we pay to have someone do our taxes and do a financial review every year to make sure we're having good practice. So those are the things that are covered within our budget.
That's very impressive. And I tried to start at least a survey in 2015. I'd gone to a village meeting of the organization and got the book. But I think one of the issues besides money was that we're rural, and they're, the biggest towns maybe have 5,000 people in them. And I couldn't find a model. I couldn't find anybody that did something similar in a area similar to ours. And then if you asked, I was trying to see who would be willing to pay and how much, but they would always say, well, it depends on what you're going to do. And I didn't know what we were going to do because that wasn't part of it. And it was just confusing.
Yeah. There are rural villages, the ones that I'm thinking of, that I would look to. There is one in Washington State. There's one in West Virginia, and then up in Vermont. Those are the 3 that I'm thinking of. And the one in Vermont, they're I believe they're an all volunteer village. So that's something you have to think about as well. So they don't have any staff costs, but they also then have to do all of everything And so, but how they've structured it, they don't charge specific dues. They do pay what you will, and operate. Sometimes I feel like our village is a faith community. Just some of the things, the needs that we meet and things like that. It's just a share, we're not connecting over theology, we're connecting over aging in place. But so they kind of lent into that as well, that it's almost like, taking an offering every month of what we need to continue to support this village. And as if you are, I'm just really recommending the Village to Village Network. They have a smaller, we do pay a membership fee to them, but there's a smaller one if you're in development. And it provides connection to those rural villages that would give a little bit more of a, this is what it looks like for us. And then for that, so, and sort of related, the liability insurance does cover the drivers. We require that they have their own vehicle insurance, and that is the that would actually, okay, so that our liability insurance covers downtowners liability if a volunteer is in an accident. So they have to go through their insurance first, and then ours might be secondary. Yeah. Okay.
I think, well, what my issue was, I was director of their agency on aging, and I couldn't put the time in to make it happen.
Yeah.
And I figured if I can't raise like $50,000 to get it started, do the 501(c), get a part-time staff, then I couldn't bother with it. So that's kind of, why I stopped.
Yeah, exactly. So our village has such a, comparatively long history, because they started so early in the early 2000s. I think their first dues were $20 a year before they were incorporated, and slowly raised. And then in 2017, people were paying $80 a year. And at that point they had the programs that were happening, the just one call, and then a service provider directory. But when they were making the jump to now we're going to hire a staff person, they raised the individual dues to $160. They doubled it. We lost a lot of people who said, this isn't what I signed up for. I don't want to do this much. So at that point, the membership had been like 185. We dropped to about 160. And now we've continued to grow. We're at about 250 people now. What our lesson learned from that is, if you're starting a village and you know that you need staff to maintain it, start at that level so that people have that expectation of this is what it is, because that big jump wasn't good for how that goes.
Good advice.
Yeah.
Fascinating. Yeah. I'm trying to superimpose it on our plethora of connecting organizations in Lewisburg. And then, of course, we have the student rental housing that stabs right through the city.
Okay.
The borough. With all pleasant people, but going to school and doing the school thing is highly the priority.
Yeah.
But am I off mute?
Yeah, you're off mute. Yep.
Oh, good. On the other hand, Judy, I think that living in a college town has its benefits.
Oh, it does.
For an organization like it. And as a source of volunteers and intergenerational connection, etc. because
Yeah.
a lot of times it's that intergenerational connection that's very difficult if, if your adult children have moved away and your
Yeah.
children live away, then, most of what you're left with is your peer group.
Mm-hmm.
And
it is a constantly revolving source of help, though. You have to initiate each person and such, and then say goodbye to them about 2 years later.
Yeah.
Melissa.
Yep.
Do you have any ideas on how it would work to combine an existing 501c3 like the rec? Because this is exactly the direction we want to go. We already have a building, but how do you merge the two? Or you can ponder that and get back to me.
Yeah.
You
Give
can
me
come back later. Because this is exactly what we do want to do in Seal and Grove. So for Rita, I'll call you.
Yeah, the governance question, I don't know. But I can answer it from a programming perspective. And so what I would consider would be, you already have a kind of a group of folks who hang out after exercise class and dream, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I would introduce this model to that group. And they could say, yeah, we want to focus on one of these 3 areas. Like, yeah, let's start planning our own programming. Let's focus on that. Or say, no, the volunteer stuff would be really helpful. Or maybe it's gathering the service providers. Unless you have a really energetic and willing to give tons of hours of time group, I would focus on one area first, and then work on building up your volunteers, work on that. You could still get, you can get the liability insurance to cover that portion of what you do. You can add it onto the policy that the rec has there. You can use the web platform that we use is Club Express. It's a cheaper model. It gets the job done. There's another one that's called Helpful Village, that is much more user friendly, and a little bit more expensive. But you don't have to be a 501c3 to subscribe to the models that make that, or a village 501c3 to do that, to help make the actual work of connecting and informing that way.
We have an online platform called Rec Desk where people can sign up and reserve and join different programs and things like that. That might even work. Okay, that's perfect though.
But yeah, so I would, if I looking at where you are, depending on you already know programming, you can kind of incorporate the member directed element of the programming into that. So maybe it was the volunteering. You can do a volunteer liability insurance rider. Our insurance isn't that expensive, and start to build that as a connecting point for the folks there. And I don't know, I guess that's how I would do it. Yeah,
that's perfect. I've taken a ton of notes. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah. And if you're looking into this, as questions come up, I might not always be very fast at responding, but I do respond. And I'm happy to answer and be a connecting point.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have met at least one member, but I don't have her name right now.
Oh, great.
At a conference, I think it was the state chapter of the planning conference that was in Lancaster last fall. And
I bet it was Chris.
Yes,
Okay.
it was Chris. What is Chris's last name?
Kennedy.
Yes, that's it. That was the person I met. And I mean, to be honest, in talking to her, I sort of had a little bit of a different impression of it. So this is helpful to know what it is formally.
Okay.
Because she was very focused on literally being in town, right?
Okay.
Living in town. She moved to town to be part of it.
Yeah.
Right. And so it was interesting for me to hear that you also work with people anywhere in the county and you provide a lot of transportation. So I'm curious with the transportation, you know, with your graphs about demographics and stuff. One of the factoids that I like to throw in there is that the average American outlives their ability to drive by 7 to 10 years. You know, a lot of us don't outlive it. So those of us who do could be 15, 20 years, right? And so I like to ask people, what's your plan, right? What are you going to do when you're the one who can't get where you need to go? So I'm curious with the providing transportation, you described going to the airport. Do you help people connect to existing transportation options or you just give rides, right?
Yeah, for the most part, we are giving rides. We have limitations on what we can do though, because our volunteers drive their own vehicles. We don't have anybody who can transport a wheelchair, like someone who needs to stay in their wheelchair. And so we will connect them to the shared ride service, which I know is not great, but that's what the resource that we have there is. So we will do that. Our requirements to be able to give someone a ride is that they have to be able to transfer into the car independently. We can transport a walker, we can transport a transfer chair in trunks. But they have to be able to transfer into the vehicle independently. We also we make sure that we have at least 3 or 4 events every year that are purposefully introducing people to the bus system. So we'll take the bus from downtown Lancaster to Columbia or to Lidditz, or they're going to do a whole trip in June that is using public transportation out to some like garden in Philadelphia and back. And so we're trying to help people feel comfortable with the other options that are there as well. So we'll introduce in that way. But when it comes to like our volunteer, you know, those miles that we log, that is us driving people places. And we are a number of members only transportation for things like that. So we have, you know, weekly grocery trips and, you know, regular appointments and things. But so that's how we do that.
Okay. Thanks. That's helpful to hear. And great to hear about sort of introducing people to transit. That's great.
Yeah.
Something I mentioned before we started officially, I'm working on an event this Thursday with it's going to be here in Lewisburg, but it is sort of a pilot for and sort of introducing some concepts statewide. We're working in concert with the Department of Conservation and Natural Resources on a program to connect older adults to the outdoors through many different avenues. And so my component of this is related to active transportation, sort of walking, biking, and using wheelchairs and accessing transit. So I'm helping to bring some bicycle rickshaws that they have to be able to get into the rickshaw, can ride. It's sort of for a trial, because there is now an international program that was started in Denmark called Cycling Without Age, which brings people, gives them the opportunity to book rides in rickshaws with volunteer pilots. And we have some incipient chapters in Pennsylvania, but I don't think there's any that are formal. The actual bikes are fairly expensive, anywhere from $5,000 to $15,000, but grant funding is available. Like we have grant funding just to even rent stuff for this weekend. So I just wanted to mention that. I know that Lancaster actually doesn't currently really have trail access, right? Like there are tons of trails in the county, but the city is sort of separate from that. Yes. But even some Cycling Without Age programs just would operate at a park, right? And Lancaster does have some lovely parks where they just will do loops. So I've just mentioned that. I think because you're an existing organization, that I could imagine in a couple of years that being sort of a partner thing that could work with you. But have you heard about things like that, or are other partners in the city doing things like that or exploring that?
I have not heard about that program in particular. I mean, last year we have one of our board members also, or I guess former board members, also works with a program called Life Cycles, and they encourage, it's a teen bike program. And what we did, we worked with them. They have, I don't know if it's the same type of rickshaw, but they have access to a rickshaw that we had members go and along the Northwest River Trail. And every Tuesday, a few members would go take a ride in the rickshaw and have pizza with the kids afterwards. So that was, you know, just kind of a fun thing to do, not necessarily for getting one place to the other. You may also know this as well, but our local chapter of Global Shapers is okay. So I could see that happening somewhere.
Yeah, they would be great, like potential pilots, you know, and just sort of people understanding the importance, and maybe even also helping people get places. Like you mentioned, a grocery run. You could do a grocery run in a bicycle rickshaw, potentially, you know, depending on where you are. Use it as a cargo bike for both the passenger and their haul.
And their haul. Yeah, I love that. No, we have one of our volunteers, he also delivers for Meals on Wheels, and when the weather's good, he does it on his bike. He has a, you know, carrier on the back. We have some folks that are transitioning to e-bikes and making that slip or that connection there. So I'm glad to know that this is happening and see where it might make sense in the future.
Yeah, let me mention one other thing. You mentioned e-bikes. We don't have it yet, but we will have an e-trike soon, and that is going to be available. We can sort of go places and attend events and let people ride it. So people can try the e-bike, just see what it's like. We also have some e-bikes, but you know, some seniors will be able to do that. Others, it'll be too much of a challenge. And we also have stuff for little kids, which is relevant to older people because they may not realize that they could be there. We have a lot of kinship families, like seniors taking care of bringing up, you know, grandchildren. The technology of teaching people to ride bikes has changed in the last 40 years since they did it last. And so we have balance bikes, which can allow grandparents to be part of teaching their kids to their grandkids to ride without running around behind them and holding them up. You know?
I know that very well.
Yeah, so we'd love to be, you know, I'll get your contact info and we'll be in touch.
Wonderful. That sounds great, Sam.
Melissa, do you do any kind of background checks or anything on the members?
We do not background check our members. When they offer to volunteer, we do background checks there. So we just do the PA state criminal background check. And if they are not a non-member volunteer, we have additional references and things that we call. So that's what we've done for that.
I mean, if they're a member and they volunteer, then you check them, did you say?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, there are some, I believe there are some villages who do a background check on all members. We haven't seen the need to do that yet, so we haven't.
Yeah, we had a time bank and we did it on all the members. It's kind of aggravating.
Yeah. Yeah, I should say part of our onboarding process too is when someone signs up as a member, usually now they're doing it through the website instead of mailing in a hard application. But they get a welcome from our membership coordinator, they get a welcome call from me, and then someone on our membership committee will arrange a one-on-one visit with them, either at our office, at a coffee shop, or at someone's home. And so we sort of build in getting to know people as well as we can into that process, and kind of we rely on that for knowing about folks. Other questions?
This has been great. Anybody else have
Great.
more questions? Yeah. Yeah. Kelly, are you feeling good?
Yes, yes, I'm very inspired.
Good.
Yeah,
Kelly,
thank you very much, Melissa.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm gonna put my contact in the
Yeah,
chat
so
here.
Kelly, I even have a logo.
You have a logo?
Yeah.
Love it. All right.
yeah. So, well, Melissa, this is wonderful, and we thank you for taking your morning and doing this for us and answering so many questions. And I think Sam is going to question you further, and
Okay.
I am pretty sure the rest of us will. But this is great because, I mean, there are, as Frida said, she's already had the book, and there are things. And I want to take a trip to West Virginia, I think, and go see the small one.
Yeah, absolutely.
Why not?
Absolutely. Good.
Oh,
Well, it's been a
okay,
pleasure to
yeah.
be with you. Thank you for
Yeah.
inviting me to join your community today.
Thank you so
and
much.
Good. I'll
Yeah.
look for you guys to show up on the village map soon.
Someday.
Well, we can hope. Yeah. So,
Wonderful.
yes, no, Kelly has a lot of enthusiasm, and this project may not get as many looks askance as some of her other ideas have. Never mind.
Good.
Yes, this is an under the radar.
Yeah. And I would say, as you look for kind of startup funding for this, I don't know who the funders are in your area, but we received a capacity building grant from a family foundation. And so for us, it's the High Family Foundation. But if you're looking for that type of support, I'd be happy to talk to you about how we showed our value in that, and what our plan was for that as well, just to kind of get that going.
So is that was when you expanded to start hiring you, or because at
Yes.
the very beginning it was okay.
At the very beginning,
it was
it
just
was
a
shoestring.
modest.
It was
Yeah.
very shoestring. Yeah.
Okay.
And so that
Well,
was
yeah.
looking at the 2017, 2018 staff area.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I can see. I mean, I'm part of a community garden in this area, and it is totally all volunteer, and the budget's not very big, but it's totally volunteer, and your thing is much more work than, and the garden's a lot of work as it is.
Oh, I do a community garden too. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I know.
Well, not just having your own plot, but all the work to keep the garden going.
I know.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Everyone enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, Melissa. Thank you.
Yep.
You have
Have
a
a
good